Imagine what it must feel like to be detained by the police and accused of a crime you didn't commit. And what if that case against you not only went to trial, but you were wrongfully convicted and sent to prison? Think of the hopelessness, anger, and frustration you'd feel. Unfortunately, this scenario is all too common in the U.S. According to the National Registry of Exonerations, every year, countless innocent people, most of them Black, are convicted and sent to prison. No one knows exactly how many innocent prisoners are serving sentences in the U.S., but studies estimate it to be between 4 and 6% of inmates. Some experts argue that the real number may be as high as 10%.
It's indescribable what a person goes through as an innocent man being charged with very, very serious crimes that he didn't do, watching the deterioration of his family, being helpless to do anything about it, and gradually losing everything.
That's Isaac Wright Jr., a practicing attorney and author of Marked for Life, One Man's Fight for Justice from the Inside. Wright served 7.5 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. He grew up in a military family and as a young man became a successful entertainment entrepreneur. He eventually settled down in New Jersey with his wife and 6-year-old daughter. But in 1991, he was falsely accused of being a drug kingpin and sentenced to Trenton State Prison for life. While behind bars, Wright became a paralegal and appealed his case.
While I was serving life in prison, I actually won a motion to be transported from a maximum security prison to the prosecutor's office, and he was made to allow me to look through my files in the case. And sitting there, I sat there in his office all day with boxes all around me. And I knew that the moment I won the motion, they were going to sanitize the files. Anything that they thought could help me, they were going to remove it. And they did. But there was one document, a single page, that I found closing out to the end of the day.
The document was an inter-office memo that ultimately proved his innocence. He was exonerated and released in 1997. But while Wright was able to get out, his case is the exception and not the norm. Not only did his exoneration require extraordinary talent and determination, but he thankfully also had access to the records he needed to prove his case. In many criminal cases, records are sparse, and critical forensic data is never collected. One expert on this is Samuel Gross, the Thomas and Mabel Long Professor Emeritus of Law at the University of Michigan and founder and senior editor of the National Registry of Exonerations. He says criminal record-keeping and data collection in the U.S. isn't just bad, it's horrendous. He argues that this sad state of affairs is partly due to the fact that many police agencies are severely underfunded, leading to officers that are inadequately trained. Gross says that, contrary to what you might see on TV, evidence collection in homicide cases isn't much better.
If you watch television, most fictional descriptions of murder cases, what you see after the murder is 2 or 3 people in look like hazmat suits going over the crime scene with a fine-tooth comb looking for every possible item of evidence. But that does not happen very much. Usually the collection of physical evidence is haphazard, and a lot of things are just missed or never collected at all. That's partly resources, but it's partly lack of care and lack of training.
In addition to a lack of training, Gross has found numerous examples of outright professional misconduct in the cases on file at the registry.
Arresting people without probable cause is unconstitutional and should not happen. Holding people for days at a time incommunicado is unconstitutional and should not happen, but it does happen. Long, terrifying, scary interrogations of teenagers without the presence of adults, without their parents or guardians, is something that should not happen. All of these things happen regularly. You can say, well, maybe they wouldn't happen if they had more resources and training, but that's not an excuse.
Gross founded the National Registry of Exonerations in 2012 with 900 cases on file. Today, the registry has recorded over 3,300 exonerations. He says the rate of these exonerations is increasing due to the rise in DNA testing technology. Wright says this type of genetic evidence is crucial in virtually all exonerations today.
Those other individuals who are innocent, whose cases are not grounded in science, they're finished. for the most part, they're done. That rug is never going to be lifted. And if you try to lift it, it's going to be slammed back down with a bunch of lies. And that is the unfortunate thing about it, is that you have to have scientific evidence on your side. You have to have a case with scientific evidence on your side in order to have any kind of chance of being exonerated.
But even with modern advances in technology like DNA testing, too many innocent people land in prison because of prosecutorial errors, corruption, or both.
Whether the reason for misconduct is lack of resources or just arrogance and the cops believe they know better and don't care what the rules are, or racism, they don't know they have a black man and that's good enough for them, or whatever the reason is, deliberate and especially deliberate repeat violations of basic rules, especially basic constitutional rules of conducting criminal investigation, should not be tolerated. And they are tolerated.
Gross says that one purpose of the registry is to make it clear to judges, prosecutors, governors, and parole boards just how common these errors are.
It used to be the case that many people believed that nobody who was not beaten or tortured would confess to committing a serious crime that he or she did not commit. But that's false. We know that lots of people confess to crimes they didn't commit, and we have records of hundreds of them. And that makes it easier to persuade a judge or a prosecutor that you too are innocent, even though you confessed under pressure.
But mistreatment by police or the courts doesn't only happen to the innocent. So how do we sort out the wrongfully accused from those who are guilty when the situation looks fishy? From a practical standpoint, Wright argues that the only way to protect the innocent is to ensure that the guilty are treated fairly.
When I try cases, obviously I'm going to take an innocent man's case. But if a person I believe committed the crime, and I see that there's a lot of things wrong in the case, illegal search and seizures, brutality, anytime there's a stench of injustice, I want to take that case because I want to make sure that the person is treated fairly. Not that he's not punished, not that he doesn't answer for his crimes, but that he's treated fairly, because I want to make sure that the innocent people are ultimately going to be treated fairly. And that's the only way to do that.
To find out more about this topic and our guests, Isaac Wright Jr. and Samuel Gross, visit viewpointsradio.org. Also, check out Wright's book, Marked for Life, One Man's Fight for Justice from the Inside, available online now and in bookstores. This segment was written and produced by Polly Hansen. Our executive producer is Amira Zaveri. Studio production by Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson. This segment was brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. If you've had COVID, you can get it again, and next time it could be worse, especially for those 50 or older or with a chronic condition. An updated vaccine gives you better protection from COVID's worst outcomes. Find COVID vaccines near you at vaccines.gov. We can do this. Coming up next week.
I woke up with all of this extra stress that I could actually feel in my body. And so for me, it was doing that intense, short workout.
The quick changes you can make to better handle stress this year. Then,
what they were able to do, unfortunately, was use weapons to have a physical attack on the power grid, which unfortunately did cause an outage in North Carolina.
Understanding the rising number of attacks on our nation's power grids. I'm Marty Peterson.
and I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.